This new manga came out only a couple of months ago, and it's still getting more hate than almost any other manga I have ever seen. But is it actually that bad? Kagurabachi is a manga that got so much hype before its first chapter even came out, and now it's one of the most loved series out there. But the manga we're talking about today is the opposite, which is why it's called the reverse Kagurabachi. It was so hated before the first chapter was even released that it is now one of the most controversial series out there. This is Astro Royale, and now that there are a few more chapters, I want to show you why people think it's awful. But I'm also going to find out if it's actually that bad, or if you might be missing out on a hidden gem. The first thing that you need to know is that the author of Astro Royale is Ken Wakui. He's one of the greatest manga authors of all time, especially when it comes to delinquent manga. But the series that truly defined his career is definitely Tokyo Revengers. And a few years ago, this series wasn't just popular, it was one of the biggest anime and manga out there by far. I remember everyone was so hyped and the fans were just going absolutely wild. It was everywhere. And you know what? At that point, I didn't even know that delinquent manga or anime was like a thing, and I still saw Tokyo Revengers absolutely every freaking where. People genuinely believe that this series was on its way to becoming one of the best delinquent manga of all time. But something happened. Tokyo Revengers lost everything that made it incredible in the first place. The final arcs were progressively getting worse and worse until the series suddenly ended. And when that happened, many fans were so disappointed that they started calling it the worst manga ending of all time. To be honest, I completely understand the disappointment people felt with Tokyo Revengers. I mean, I think it might be kind of similar to how I felt with the ending of Jujutsu Kaisen. But here's the problem. Some fans didn't just feel disappointed, they were angry. So when Ken Wakui announced that he was starting a new manga called Astro Royale, these fans immediately started criticizing it, hating on it, and saying it was going to be a massive failure. And 20 chapters later, you'd think that things were a bit calmer, but the hatred is still going very strong. And holy shit, there are a lot of things people hate about it. But don't you worry, because I discovered that there are 3 main things that people hate the most. And the first one is kind of insane because it has to do with the entire manga. Okay, so imagine you live in the city where there's like this powerful Yakuza gang. Now, the leader of this powerful gang is dying. So someone needs to replace him, which is great because he had many, and I mean many, children. And before you say anything, don't get the wrong idea because only one of them was his biological child. And he also happens to be our main character, Hibaru. And so far, this is sounding pretty much like your typical delinquent manga, right? Wrong. Because while they're deciding who's gonna replace the leader guy, a freaking meteorite strikes Japan. And anyone who's making a wish during the moment of impact gets a superpower called an Astro. Why? Well, there's actually a very simple explanation to that. The family that was once united splits to separate gangs, but now each of them has superpowers. And now Hibaru and his siblings need to fight each other with these superpowers to decide who's going to become a new leader. Okay, so all this pretty much happens in the first chapter of the manga, and the cool part, I think, is that there is a clear battle royale aspect to the entire story. And apparently I'm one of the rare people that thinks that part is cool because there is so much hate for the plot of Astro Royale. And the scary part is that a lot of people say that the story just gets worse and worse. There are currently over 20 chapters in this manga. And if the story is bad for over 20 chapters, then yeah, this manga is not a hidden gem whatsoever. So I continued reading because, I just had to find out if the entire story was actually that bad. To be honest, this is like the weirdest combination ever. Like, it's post-apocalyptic, it has Yakuza gangs, and it has superpowers. And then the next chapter, okay, so now this is chapter 4, and Hibaru is about to fight one of his siblings, and that's where you really see the sort of battle royale aspect of this manga come in. But a few chapters later, okay, so this is chapter 12, and they go on like the secondary mission to help like a little girl, and I'm not gonna tell you what happens, but just know that this moment melted my freaking heart. Right there, man. Astro Royale clearly doesn't take itself too seriously. One chapter you're in a haunted house, the next 2 characters are competing to see who cooks the best food for someone. And it's these secondary missions that really make the story enjoyable to read, in my opinion. In general, the story is really simple, and trust me, that's a good thing. There are so many complicated manga out there right now that something a bit easier to read feels kind of refreshing. And the truth is that there are a bunch of very successful manga with incredible stories that also have very simple premises, like One Piece, for example. And even though a bunch of people hate Astro Royale's story, I can promise you there's a part of the story that is so much more controversial. Because apparently it's not something that the author has struggled with for a few chapters or something. It's a problem that he's had for years. Okay, what do you think these three characters have in common? This is the first character, this is the second character, and this is the third character. Here's the thing. One of them is from Astro Royale, and two of them are from Tokyo Revengers. And the thing they have in common is that they have pretty unusually long necks. That's the way Ken Wakui has been drawing his characters for a while. And to be honest, if the only issue with the art style is that the neck is kind of long, I think that's unique and weirdly cool. But a lot of people are saying that Astro Royale's second problem isn't just the neck part. The problem is that the art in general is terrible. And if that's true, then this manga might definitely be as bad as people are saying. So I had to find out if the art actually looks that disgusting. Okay, check this out. This is a panel from the first chapter of the manga where you see the entire city destroyed after the meteor crash, right? And it's looking pretty good. Okay, this is a few chapters later, and you know what? The design of the characters is kind of cool, to be honest. But what do we want from a battle shonen? Awesome looking battles, right? And some of these action scenes are actually looking really good. I mean, look at this part. It looks kind of sick. It looks kind of sick, let's not lie. And I know that a lot of people don't really like the design of the Astros, but personally, they kind of remind me of tribal tattoos, which I get it. It might not be for everyone, but personally, I think it's pretty aesthetically pretty. That's all I have to say. Listen, I personally really appreciate that the author has his own style and that the characters can look a little bit quirky. And yes, the necks are going crazy, but did it make me look forward to every new character? Absolutely. So is the art of Astro Royale anything special? No. But is the art the worst thing I've ever seen? No! Not every panel is a masterpiece like Berserk or One Punch Man where you're going to pause just to stare at it, but come on, some of these panels are genuinely gorgeous. I've seen some people be really upset that the style of Astro Royale looks so similar to Tokyo Revengers, and I'm like, yes, it's the same author! When I was reading people's comments, I thought the necks and the art in general was the thing people hated the most. But I was shocked when I discovered that there's something people hate so much more. You need to see this. Okay, this time I'm going to show you three characters from Astro Royale, and you need to tell me what you think they have in common. So there's this guy who's the #1 street fighter in Astro Royale. There's this guy who's basically this big, strong dude. And finally, there's this guy who can make rocks float. Yeah. And they're all Hibaru's siblings. And I just showed you a couple of characters, but the truth is there are way more. But here's the problem. Characters are the thing people hate the most about Astro Royale. Because according to them, these characters are boring, they're not original, and they're just generally the worst. And the crazy part is that it's not only the secondary characters. Apparently the main character is also the most generic and boring MC in years. One thing the best shonen series get right is having a cast of characters that are unique and work well together. So if the characters are that bad, Astro Royale's chances of being a hidden gem are pretty much over. So I had to see for myself if these characters were as bland as people were saying, or if it was just an exaggeration. Okay, so there's this scene where Hibaru was fighting one of these powerful villains called Gaido, right? During the fight, we get to see the dude's backstory, which made me feel kind of bad for him, even though he's, yeah, technically a bad guy. And there's also this scene where there's a policeman who realizes how important his weapon actually is now that a lot of people have superpowers, and he needs to protect regular citizens from these people. And again, you do kind of feel bad for the dude. And there's also this scene, you know, the moment that melted my freaking heart. Well, that moment kind of only happens because of all the character development she gets beforehand. When it comes to Hibaru, I think I kind of understand where people are coming from. He's definitely not the most original main character. There's one thing about him that I think really works. His objective isn't to become the leader or become the best or to prove something to someone. It's to reunite his family. And to me, that feels very different from a lot of shonen main characters like Naruto or Luffy. And because of that, he's the kind of protagonist that always tries to empathize with others, even if they're his enemy. That doesn't always make him interesting, but it definitely gives a lot of tiny characters amazing development and really emotional stories, like all the characters I mentioned before. And here's the really cool part. We get to meet a lot of these awesome secondary characters. So is this part of Astro Royale awful? Absolutely not. Those are the three things people hate the most about this manga. But the truth is, there's something that interests me way more than these three things. And I think that this something is the key to knowing if Astro Royale is really that terrible or not. For some reason, no one is talking about it. Imagine you're living in a peaceful city, doing whatever you're doing and simply enjoying your day, and then bam, a freaking meteorite falls from the sky. And if you make a wish while it's falling, holding an object that's important to you, the wish will come true. How do you know? Well, everyone's saying it on Twitter, so it must be true, right? But the little detail you didn't know is that by doing that, you would unlock superpowers depending on what you wished for. Maybe you wish to be a better cook, so your spatula can turn into a massive spatula that creates delicious sauces. Maybe you wish to be stronger, so your phone turns into like this big robot arm that can make you carry anything. Or maybe you wish to drink more water, so you turn into a swimming pool. That's it. Unlike most delinquent manga or anime out there, Astro Royale has a power system, which is a cool twist on something that has existed forever. And even though I really respect that Ken Wakui is trying something new, I also want it to be good because I absolutely love power systems, and also because I know how easily a bad power system can ruin an entire story. So here's the really big question. Is the power system actually good? Well, check this out. First of all, I think the reason for people getting these powers is kind of dumb. Like, I mean, the whole meteor thing and people making wishes, it's not great. It's not great, to be honest. And that was not the only thing. I'm sorry, but yeah, I mean, the Astros look cool, yeah, but the abilities the characters get are they're generally kind of lame. Like, the main character basically just punches, but stronger. But even though I wasn't loving it, something else happened. Do you remember the policeman who lost his weapon and understood how important it was now that people have superpowers? I think that's amazing because the power system has like this social aspect, and not many power systems bother doing that kind of thing. To be honest, there are definitely a few things that aren't perfect with Astro Royale's power system. There are also a few things that it nails. Don't get me wrong, I love that the author is taking this risk, but I genuinely think that this is one of those power systems where if it wasn't there, it would not have made a big difference. So in the end, is Astro Royale the pile of trash people say it is? Or is it a hidden gem that you should definitely pick up? And I think that my answer is going to surprise you because there's one very important thing I didn't mention on purpose. I have never read Tokyo Revengers. And I didn't read Tokyo Revengers now because I actually wanted to give Astro Royale a fair chance. And I think that's kind of the problem. Because I had never read Tokyo Revengers or even heard of this author before this, to me, this was just a regular shonen. But if you have read Tokyo Revengers, I think you absolutely need to check out Astro Royale. Try to see this manga as Ken Wakui's way of making it up to you. He's experimenting, improving, and trying to give readers a fresh experience so you can enjoy something different and feel excited about the story once again. And if you're still angry at Tokyo Revengers, I get it. I'll let Astro Royale cook. It's doing pretty decent in the Weekly Shonen Jump, but I think that that's because a lot of people believe it actually has potential. And to me, that is the definition of a hidden gem.